Hi everyone, this is Yana Smakula and thank you for stopping by. This video is a part of a Simon Says Stamp blog hop celebrating Simon's Hey Love release. Lately, I'm all about creating simple, funny cards using stamps of all sorts, and this project is no different. So Simon came out with these fabulous mandala cling 6x6 background stamps. There are 3 different designs and they are simply stunning. I've already shared this card on my blog created using one of the backgrounds. I heat embossed it in gold embossing powder onto vellum and created a gatefold wrap for a card. I have a panel of Simon's smoke cardstock hidden inside this wrap with a stamped love and a handwritten message. So these stamps are great for creating unique, one-of-a-kind backgrounds. They work beautifully for heat embossing or stamping a wedding card, or a wedding invitation, or just an elegant thinking of you note, for example. Now, because I'm all about creating funny cards lately, I challenged myself to find a use for these stamps on a simple, cute project. So as I was brainstorming some ideas, I came across an image of a peacock online, and a part of this background looked like a peacock's tail to me. So I immediately looked through my stash in search of a tiny bird image that I could use together with a portion of that stamp to create a funny peacock for a card. Because this is such a beautiful background, I also stamped the entire piece using a light gray color of ink onto my background panel to add a little bit of interest to this project. I'm going to quickly walk you through the creative process and will show you how you can make this card yourself. I already have my background stamp mounted inside my medium-sized MISTI. You don't need to use MISTI or a similar stamping tool to create this card, but it does make life much easier. The first thing you want to do is stamp the image directly onto the paper you have inside your MISTI. I already have that done. That stamped image will help you better align and center your background panel. By the way, I removed the black foam pad from the MISTI to be able to stamp using my cling stamp. Because I have 2 size MISTIs, and since I only use this medium size for my cling background stamps, I simply permanently removed the black foam pad. I do have it in a drawer next to my desk and I can put it back in anytime, but I keep my MISTI without it only because I use this size for my cling stamps. I'm going to place my 4 by 5¼ inches white cardstock panel inside the MISTI, aligning it according to the pattern I have stamped in the background. I want this design to be centered on my panel. I'm using Simon's Fog ink to do my stamping, and I'm going to stamp this design partially onto my paper. The reason I went with this particular ink color is I wanted to have this design stamped on my card, but I didn't want it to compete with the other elements. In other words, if I were to stamp it using black or dark gray or dark brown ink, it would have become too distracting for this project. You'll notice that I'm triple stamping this image to have the most perfect impression I can. And this is the beauty of using a MISTI. I can go back and stamp the image again and again until I have the perfect ink transfer or desired ink color intensity on my project. I'm also going to stamp the same design onto another piece of cardstock. This time I'm using Simon's Intense Black ink. I will use this piece to color and cut out the faux peacock's tail, and because I will be coloring it using Copic markers, I need to use appropriate ink type. Simon's Intense Black is a perfect ink for this, as it's not going to bleed when it comes in contact with alcohol markers. I'm also going to stamp the little bird from the Cuddly Critter accessories stamp set using that same ink. You can also use the little bird from the Stacking Animals stamp set or a bird from another stamp set you have. It doesn't really have to be this particular bird. The idea is to use a bird that is not a peacock to pass on the funny meaning of the project, a bird pretending to be a peacock. Like I mentioned, I'm going to use my Copic markers to do my coloring. You can use any other coloring medium you like, pencils, watercolors. You can also stamp this design onto colored cardstock or even do ink blending using Distress or other inks. The colors that I'm going to use today are BG18, BG13, and BG32. This is my go-to teal color combo. By the way, I recently published a blog post where I shared my favorite Copic marker color combos. I am a beginner when it comes to Copics, but a few of you asked me to share my favorite colors, so I did that in a handy little chart. I'll link to that blog post in my video description in case you'd like to check it out. I'm also using a YG03 color to add some green to this project. and a dark B29 blue, as well as a lighter B05 blue. I will use the exact same colors to color the bird. And you can also go to Pinterest and look up an image of a peacock to see what other colors you can use. You can definitely incorporate some yellow here. And I actually tried 3 different ways to color this image, or 3 different color combos, but I liked this one the most. After my coloring was done, I used a coordinating die to cut the bird out. There isn't a die for the background, plus we are only using a portion of the background, so I had to cut it out using scissors. It doesn't take too long, it's a small image and not very detailed. I did use a black Copic marker and colored the edge of the paper to hide the white core. I really don't like how the white shows through on the side of the paper. It just makes the image look incomplete, so I always like to do this. For my sentiment, I went with "I hope you always find a reason to smile." And I think it's a very appropriate sentiment for this card, especially for the bird trying to pass as a peacock. By the way, as far as I know, peacocks are bad luck in England, so you might want to avoid giving a card like this to a British friend of yours. Now, I used fun foam to adhere my stamped background onto an A2 top-folding fog note card. I used blue fun foam as it just happened to have a ton of colored foam and no white. So I'm trying to use my colored one before I go on and order any white for my projects. I also foam mounted the bird onto the tail, and next I used a white gel pen and added a white dot onto each of the black stamped dots. You might have noticed that they didn't stamp very well, and I wasn't really concerned about that, as I knew I'd be using a white gel pen to add dots later. I was just about ready to foam mount the peacock onto the card when I made the first project, as I remembered I had these fun wobble springs in my stash. I actually made a note in my planner to use them, as I think they are so funny. I used one a couple months ago on a card I did for Pretty Pink Posh, and I fell in love with this little ingenious device. So I used a wobble spring, or an actual wobbler as I like to call them here, to adhere the bird and the tail onto the card. Now it was a little bit too big, a little bigger than the tail, and you can see a tiny part of it at the top, but it didn't bother me. There are smaller size action springs out there if you want to use a smaller one, but I didn't have a smaller one and I really wanted to use this one, so I went with this one. Lastly, I added some Simon sequins and a couple of clear droplets from Pretty Pink Posh, and that finished my project. Be sure to head over to my blog to join the blog hop and find lots more inspiration using Simon's Hey Love products. On the screen, you're seeing a couple additional videos where I'm creating funny cards using stamps. Feel free to check them out for more inspiration. Thank you for joining me today. I will see you next time. Bye-bye.